Dato' Sri Anwar's UK visit to breathe new life into bilateral ties. Lebanon's president names Nawaf Salam as Prime Minister. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. This is World Today. I'm Shuhaida Arifin. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim last night had an audience with the United Arab Emirates UAE Vice President and Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, who is also the ruler of Dubai. The meeting was held at the Zabil Palace in Dubai. During the meeting, both leaders discussed on bolstering bilateral ties and exploring opportunities in renewable energy, food and energy security, artificial intelligence and data centers, as well as regional and global issues of mutual concern. Accompanying Dato' Sri Anwar during the meeting were Investment, Trade and Industry Minister Tengku Dato' Sri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz and Higher Education Minister Dato' Sri Dr. Zamri Abdul Kadir. The Prime Minister's three-day visit to UAE is at the invitation of Sheikh Mohammed to attend the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. Dato' Sri Anwar arrived in Abu Dhabi on Sunday. Earlier in the day, Dato' Sri Anwar began his second day of the visit by meeting with senior management from the country's sovereign wealth funds. Upon completion of his visit to the UAE, Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim will undertake a 5-day working visit to the United Kingdom, Malaysia's third largest trading partner in Europe. Malaysian High Commissioner to the UK and Northern Ireland, Dato' Zakri Jaafar, said the Premier's visit at the invitation of his counterpart, Keir Starmer. Dato' Zakri said that the visit to the UK is the first by Dato' Sri Anwar since becoming Prime Minister. The visit is expected to give new life and also strengthen bilateral relations between Malaysia and the UK, which covers various fields. It will also be fully utilised to explore new initiatives in trade and investment following the UK's participation in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. Dato' Zakri said Malaysia, as ASEAN chairman for this year, will also use the opportunity of the visit to discuss the focus and direction of Malaysia's chairmanship with the theme Inclusivity and Sustainability. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun has picked international jurist Nawaf Salam to form a government to pull the war-scarred country out of economic crisis. A majority of Lebanese lawmakers endorsed Salam, the presiding judge at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, after 2 years of caretaker government. Salam was abroad but will return to Lebanon today. Aoun, whose election last week ended a 2-year vacancy for the post, held a consultation with lawmakers earlier in the day ahead of announcing his selection. Aoun said he hoped the process of forming a government would be smooth and as quick as possible. Salam's backers view the judge and former ambassador as an impartial figure who is able to carry out the much-needed reforms. The new Prime Minister will face major challenges, including implementing reforms to satisfy international donors to lift the country out of the worst financial collapse in its history. He will also face the daunting task of reconstructing swathes of Lebanon destroyed in the Israel-Hezbollah war, as well as implementing the 27th November ceasefire agreement. A wave of Israeli airstrikes killed more than 50 people in the Palestinian territory's main city. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency spokesman Mahmoud Basal said the strikes pounded Gaza City throughout the day, hitting schools, homes and even gatherings of people. The agency said at least 11 people were killed and several others injured when an Israeli strike targeted a house belonging to Jaradah and Abu Khatir families in the city's Shujaiyat neighborhood. It added 7 other people were killed in a strike on a group of Palestinians on Al-Maqmal Street in Gaza City. The agency further said 5 people lost their lives in another strike that hit Salahuddin Al-Ayyubi School in the city's Al-Daraj neighborhood. The remaining casualties occurred in other strikes across the Gaza City throughout the day. Basel noted that there is no room in hospitals to receive the injured victims. According to figures from the territory's health ministry, which the United Nations considered reliable, Israel's military offensive in Gaza has killed 46,584 people, a majority of them civilians. Meanwhile, there have been considerable advances in the most recent round of indirect talks between Israel and Hamas aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza. A source familiar with the talks said the significant progress on the remaining sticking points in the latest negotiations in Qatar had led to a new concrete proposal being presented to the parties. Qatar, alongside fellow mediators, the United States and Egypt, has been engaged in months of talks between Israel and Hamas that have failed to end the devastating conflict in Gaza. Since early January, indirect negotiations have resumed in Doha to strike a ceasefire deal that would facilitate the release of dozens of hostages still held in Gaza. The sources said Qatar's premier had played a significant role in bridging the final gaps between the two sides. The source added that there had been a positive initial response to the deal from both sides, which would see more than 30 Israeli hostages held by Hamas released in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in an initial first phase. A previous round of mediation in December ended without a deal, with both sides blaming each other for the impasse. Now, EU leaders will gather in Belgium on 3rd February for an exceptional defence retreat involving Britain's Prime Minister and NATO's Secretary General 2 weeks after Donald Trump returns to the White House.
The talks will come at a crucial juncture, with key Ukraine backers Britain and EU warily eyeing Trump's promises to put a swift end to the conflict after taking power on 20th January. Trump had also demanded NATO members to raise their defence spending. European Council Chief Antonio Costa said Europe needs to assume greater responsibility for its own defence. Costa extended an official invitation last month for British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to join the February meeting as his Labour Party pushes to reset relations with the EU after years of post-Brexit rancour. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte will also attend to discuss the most pressing defence-related issues, in particular their support for Ukraine as well as EU-NATO cooperation. Talks will focus on defining priorities for boosting Europe's defence capabilities, measures to accelerate private financing and better mobilise public funds for defence, and ways to deepen partnerships, including with non-EU European partners.
Foreign ministers from South Korea and Japan met in Seoul to discuss strengthening their relations in the face of increasing security challenges in the region and political tumult in the host nation.
It marked the highest-level diplomatic meeting between the countries since South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's short-lived imposition of martial law last month, a move that has triggered a political turmoil in one of Asia's most vibrant democracies. Japan's Takeshi Iwaya said at a joint press conference with South Korea's Cho Tae-yul that the security situation in the region is becoming very severe, and in that strategic environment, the importance of Japan-South Korea relations has not changed and in fact has become increasingly important. Chu meanwhile said the ministers had expressed strong concerns over North Korea's nuclear and missile development. Chu said he and Iwaya had agreed on the necessity of continued close coordination among South Korea, Japan, and the United States to counter the North Korean nuclear threat. He added Tokyo and Seoul's bilateral ties would also continue to be developed under any circumstances, with diplomacy to remain consistent and unwavered.
ASEAN Secretary-General Dr. Kao Kim On will lead the ASEAN Secretariat's delegation to the 5th ASEAN Digital Ministers meeting and related events scheduled to take place in Bangkok over 2 days starting on 16 January. According to the ASEAN Secretariat, his attendance at the meeting, hosted by Thailand as the ASEAN Digital Ministers meeting chair for this year, is at the invitation of Prasad Jantararuangthong, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Digital Economy and Society of Thailand. The Secretariat noted that the meeting will discuss ways to advance the vision of establishing ASEAN as digital community and economic bloc empowered by secure and transformative digital services, technologies and ecosystems as highlighted in the ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025. Dr. Kao is also scheduled to engage in bilateral meetings with ministers and high-level representatives from the ASEAN member state dialogue partners as well as from the private sector. Vietnamese products are gaining traction and increasing their market share in the ASEAN bloc, particularly in neighboring countries such as Cambodia and Laos. A report by Vietnam's Ministry of Industry and Trade highlights substantial opportunities for Vietnam to expand exports of agricultural products, food and consumer goods to ASEAN countries, including Indonesia and Malaysia. Trade promotion activities have also been ramped up. In Ho Chi Minh City, the Investment and Trade Promotion Center has organized numerous market connection conferences, offering businesses insights into regional markets and export strategies. According to the center's director, Tran Phu, ASEAN represents a highly promising export market for Vietnamese businesses. Often overlooked, it aligns well with the capabilities of small and medium-sized enterprises. Last year, trade turnover between Vietnam and ASEAN reached a record $83 billion, an increase of $10 billion compared to 2023. More than 1 million members of an influential religious sect gathered in the Philippine capital, opposing steps to unseat Vice President Sara Duterte. Crowds wearing white shirts and carrying banners calling for unity flocked to Manila's Quirino Grandstand for the Nationals Rally for Peace, organized by the conservative Iglesia Ni Cristo. The powerful sect opposes moves to impeach Duterte, a former ally of President Ferdinand Marcos, in the House of Representatives. Schools, government offices and major roads were closed for the event, as police estimated 1.6 million people had gathered at the grandstand and more than 5,000 officers had been deployed. Duterte is facing 3 impeachment cases which accuse her of misusing millions of dollars in public funds and of plotting to have Marcos assassinated. Duterte, however, has denied the allegations. Iglesia, which is estimated to have more than 2 million members, carries a significant weight in the Philippines because its members tend to vote a bloc and it is often quoted by politicians. The sect could decide the outcome of closely contested congressional and local government posts in midterm elections on 12 May. Still ahead, a 6.8 magnitude quake prompts Japan tsunami alert. A 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck off southwestern Japan, causing small tsunamis in the area, but no major damage was reported.
According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the quake was detected around 18 kilometers off the Kyushu region around 9:19 p.m. local time. The Japan Meteorological Agency initially warned of possible tsunami waves of up to 1 meter high and urged people to stay away from coastal waters. However, the weather agency said several smaller tsunamis of only around 20 centimeters were detected at ports in the region. Local media reported that only minor damage occurred, including a broken window at a train station and objects falling off shelves in a few stores. Japan sits on top of 4 major tectonic plates along the western edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire and is one of the world's most tectonically active countries. The archipelago, home to around 125 million people, experiences around 1,500 jolts every year. The vast majority are mild, though the damage they cause varies according to their location and depth below the Earth's surface.
Public transport, air travel, schools and essential services were disrupted across Belgium as a nationwide strike took place to protest proposed pension reforms by the coalition forming the new federal government.
In Brussels, more than 30,000 protesters, including firefighters, teachers and union members, marched to the roads. Unions denounced the proposed pension reforms as an attack on pensions, calling for improved working conditions, increased employer contributions and shorter career requirements for demanding professions. They also criticized corporate tax breaks, arguing that the reforms would place an unfair burden on workers. Public transport was severely affected, with only 1 in 3 trains operating between major cities. In Brussels, metro, tram and bus services ran at reduced capacity, while most bus routes in Wallonia were completely suspended. Air travel also faced significant disruptions, with approximately 40% of flights at Brussels Airport cancelled and all flights at Charleroi Airport suspended. The education sector was hit hard, with about 40% of schools in Flanders closed.
Germany's meat and dairy exports outside the EU face severe restrictions after the country's first case of the livestock disease, foot and mouth, was confirmed last week. German authorities confirmed the country's first outbreak of foot and mouth disease in nearly 40 years in a herd of water buffalo on the outskirts of Berlin.
German authorities said measures to contain the highly infectious disease, which poses no danger to humans, are being implemented. The Federal Agriculture Ministry said the loss of Germany's status as free from foot and mouth disease under the World Organization for Animal Health requirements means many veterinary certificates for export outside the EU can no longer be issued. The ministry said, consequently, exports of milk and dairy products, meat and meat products, hides and skins and blood products are currently hardly possible, adding that it assumed third countries would immediately impose bans on such goods from Germany. German meat exports to the EU, however, are likely to continue because current rules require exports to be stopped only from the region of an EU country directly suffering from a disease. The ministry said some countries are already restricting imports of German meat, including Mexico and South Korea.
Berlin has sounded out potential buyers for Uniper in a deal that could see the German government selling its entire holding in the €18.4 billion energy utility.
Germany's government, which owns 99.12% of the company after nationalizing it in 2022 during Europe's energy crisis, is pursuing a partial stake sale of around 25% as a preferred option, but is also weighing exiting its holding in one go. According to sources, parties that have been approached about a full scale, including Canadian fund Brookfield. A full sale to a private equity fund would be one of Europe's biggest in recent years. Uniper nearly collapsed after its former main gas supplier, Russia's Gazprom, first curbed and later stopped deliveries after the outbreak of the Ukraine war, forcing the Germany government to step in to ensure energy security in Europe's biggest economy. Germany's finance ministry, which oversees the government's Uniper stake, said the government was examining all scenarios to cut its stake with no firm decision regarding timing and structure. It reiterated that the leading option for their reprivatization was selling shares via the equity market.
Chinese officials are mulling a potential option that involves the sale of TikTok's United States operations to billionaire Elon Musk if the company fails to fend off a potential ban. Chinese officials prefer that TikTok remains under the control of a parent ByteDance, adding that the company is contesting the ban with an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Under one scenario, Musk's social media platform X would take control of TikTok US and run the business together. The Chinese officials have yet to reach any firm consensus about how to proceed, and their deliberations are still preliminary. The Cyberspace Administration of China and China's Ministry of Commerce, government agencies that could be involved in decisions about TikTok's future, could not be immediately reached for comment. TikTok also declined to comment, while Musk did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Last week, the Supreme Court seemed inclined to uphold a law that would force a sale or ban of TikTok in the US by 19th January, stemmed by the national security concerns about China.
Electric car sales rose by 25% globally last year, surging in China but slowing in Europe. This is according to figures published by the British consultancy Motion.
A record 17.1 million battery electric vehicles were sold last year across the world. China pulled further ahead as the world's leading market for electric cars, with 11 million sold, an increase of 40% from 2023. In Europe, sales slipped by 3% to 3 million vehicles after 4 years of strong growth. In an overall declining market in Europe, hybrids took the largest market share at the expense of petrol and diesel vehicle. The end of state financial purchase incentives to consumers penalized sales in Germany last year, while they jumped by 21.4% in Britain. EV sales also rose in the United States and Canada, climbing 9% to 1.8 million vehicles. Motion noted that the government measures play an important role in the sales dynamics as EV remains considerably more expensive. The firm said plans by President-elect Donald Trump to halt sales incentives would almost certainly have an impact on electric vehicle sales in the US this year.
Novak Djokovic survived a first set scare to begin his quest for an 11th Australian Open title and record 25th Grand Slam crown in shaky fashion. The 37-year-old was flat-footed and out of ideas early on against teenage American wildcard Nishesh Basavaredi, who was making his Grand Slam May draw debut.
Adamant he can still compete with the world's best, but his struggles against a player ranked 107 did little to. Meanwhile, Jannik Sinner launched his Australian Open title defence with a 7-6, 7-6, 6-1 win over Nicholas Jarry in a match that put the player's contrasting doping cases in the spotlight. World number one Sinner, who avoided suspension after failing 2 drug tests last March, was given a good battle on the sun-drenched Rod Laver Arena by the big serving Chilean, who was banned for 11 months in 2020 for doping. The saga has taken little toll on the Italian's tennis. His defeat of the world number 36 Jarry was the US Open champion's 16th win in succession and 15 at the hardcourt Grand Slams. Elsewhere, Malaysia, American 17th seed Frances Tiafoe held off Arthur Randeknecht in a thrilling five-setter, edging the Frenchman 7-6, 6-3, 4-6, 6-7, 6-3. Tiafoe, a former quarterfinals at Melbourne Park, vomited at the end of the fourth set before wrapping up the victory in 4 hours and 8 minutes. In the women's draw, Polish world number 2 Iga Swiatek, chasing a 6th Grand Slam crown and a first at Melbourne Park, eliminated Katerina Siniakova 6-3, 6-4. In the match against the 50th ranked Siniakova, Swiatek struggled to find the deliberate rhythm that helped her win 5 Grand Slam titles as her opponent, a doubles specialist, put up some stiff resistance. However, the reigning French Open champion delivered when it was most needed. She saved only one of the 3 break points she faced, but was decisive with her heavy forehand at the most perilous moments in both sets.
Toyota's Henk Lategan dominated Stage 8 of the Dakar Rally, and despite a speed violation, the win extended his overall lead after the previous day's chaotic race had virtually wiped out his advantage over the closest rival, Yazid Al-Raji.
Dakar Rally organisers were forced to erase any gains or losses for a 20-kilometre stretch during Sunday's stage over a road book note error, and Lategan's lead had been cut to 21 seconds. Lategan bounced back, triumphing on the 487-kilometre special from Al-Duwadimi to Riyadh, with Al-Raji down in 6, coming in 5 minutes and 20 seconds behind the South African, with the local driver now 5 minutes and 41 seconds adrift overall. The stage winner received a 2-minute penalty for speeding during the control zone, but Lategan still finished 1 minute and 47 seconds ahead of a fellow South African and teammate Guy Botterill, who had pushed the leader for long parts of the stage. Lategan and co-driver Brett Cummings have led the race in Stage 2, and the pair have 4 stages left, with today's race taking the drivers from Riyadh to Harad.
And that wraps up World Today. In our top story, Dato Sri Anwar's UK visit to breathe new life into bilateral ties. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight, coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. Till then, I'm Shuhaida Arifin. From river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you for watching.